Hey everybody, Jarek here. Halo Reach is a very divisive game. You either love it or you hate it. Back in the day I was one of those people that really didn't like it, but I was still excited for the release of Halo Reach on PC for a few reasons. The first one is that this is the first time we've had a real Halo game launching on PC that isn't a weird port from Gearbox or Halo 2 Vista. The second one is that I hadn't played the game for 6 or 7 years, and even though I really didn't like it when it first came out, maybe something had changed. Let's give it another shot and let's see how this goes. Before I talk about how good Halo Reach is, I probably should get the elephant out of the room. How is the PC port? I can understand some of you might not be interested in this, so you can just skip forward past this part if you aren't. But given that about every 5 minutes on my stream someone came in to ask how good the PC port was, a lot of people apparently want to know. Let's start with the good. This game looks leagues better than the original 360 version. The 360 was pretty outdated by 2010 when Reach came out. It ran at a low resolution and just upscaled it, and ran at 30 FPS. This made for a somewhat noisy game that by 360 standards looked fine and actually pretty good, but by everything else, really could have been improved. What I'm saying is that Reach was stuck on an outdated platform that doesn't look good in 2019. The PC release does a lot of things to make this game look a lot better. For starters, as I said, you can run at whatever native resolution you want. If you have a 4K monitor, feel free to play this game in 4K. I was playing it in 1440 and it looked very clear. They increased the draw distance and allowed models in the distance to properly render instead of being lower poly until you got closer to them. There's an FOV slider now, thank God. You can increase it from the default 78 that it originally had. I kept it at about 95. This does have some downsides. You can see your left shoulder with some of the one-handed weapons like say the pistol and the needler, but for the most part it worked perfectly fine. But really there is one upgrade they did that makes this game look so much clearer than the original 360 version, and that is that they got rid of temporal anti-aliasing. Thank goodness. Temporal anti-aliasing added a ridiculous amount of ghosting. It was incredibly apparent and you couldn't unsee it. The picture was very noisy because of it. Removing this makes the entire game look a lot better. It's almost like that feeling of when you play an old game in an emulator and you crank all the settings up, it just looks so clear compared to what you saw before. The port is not perfect though. If you go to the graphics settings, there's just not a whole lot. You can't tune this to whatever you want. Practically the only settings you have are an FOV slider and enhanced graphics. I don't know what this means, it just says enhanced. Thankfully this is an old game, so any of you should be able to run it, but if it wasn't old this would be a really big problem. Regardless, there should be something here that you can change, but there really isn't. The next really big problem the port has is that it just doesn't feel good to control. It almost feels like there's input delay, and the mouse aim I could never get used to. No matter what sensitivity I put it to, it didn't feel natural. Something about it just feels off. This is incredibly frustrating when you're trying to play the multiplayer. Speaking of frustrating while you're playing the multiplayer, you can't crouch while you're moving. No, I'm not kidding you. If you were pressing a movement key and you press crouch, nothing happens. You have to completely let go of the movement keys, crouch, then walk. And that's absolutely absurd when you're trying to outstrafe and outshoot someone and you can't crouch mid-strafe. Seriously, that's something they need to fix really quick. The last problem this port has is that the audio mixing feels really off. The music is too loud and the gunshots are too quiet. Things stand out where they shouldn't and other things sound really muffled. They really need to work with it. This is something they already know. They acknowledged this back in October and it's still not been fixed. I would love to play some clips for you here just so you get an idea of the audio mixing, but a lot of the audio mixing has to do with the music and I can't play the music due to copyright stuff, which is unfortunate, especially with how good the music is. I'll talk about that later. Just take my word for it, the audio mixing in this sounds really, really bad. So what's the final verdict of the port? It looks a lot clearer, which is a huge improvement, but there are a lot of downsides that need to be worked out. This is very clearly a work in progress, and if you're looking for the definitive version of Reach, it's not this quite yet. They really need to work some things out before it can be that. I'd still prefer to play it over the original 360 version, but there's also the version that was added in the Master Chief Collection on the Xbox One, so right now that version is looking better than the PC version. But okay, with that out of the way, let's go on to the actual game. For those unaware, Halo Reach was a prequel to the original Halo Combat Evolved. Reach is an interesting situation. It's a prequel to Halo Combat Evolved, and we all already knew what was going to happen. It's the fall of Reach. The entire planet is going down, and at the end it's going to be the start of Master Chief's journey. You play as Six, the newest member of a Spartan team. This Spartan team is essentially tasked with the impossible of saving Reach. It's a losing battle, and you all know what's happening here. These Spartans are going to die one by one. But my biggest problem with the plot was how everything went down. It seemed like everyone was having a who can have the most noble death competition. Most of the deaths seem completely avoidable or completely pointless. George's death is a great example. He sacrifices his life to blow up a Covenant carrier, but mere moments after this, an entire Covenant fleet warps in. The only example of a good death that actually could tug on your emotions in Halo Reach was Kat's death, because it came so suddenly. A nearby Covenant blast demolishes the city your Spartan team is in, dropping all of your shields in the process. While your Spartan team is going to take cover and refuge from the blast, Kat suddenly gets domed in the head. It isn't Kat accepting her death for the better of Reach suddenly without no remorse or caring. No, you just die. She had no say in the matter, it happened. The way they portray this death is fantastic, because this was the turning point of the story. Up until this point, you had been fighting the Covenant. This is when everyone had realized, it's all futile, you're fighting a losing war. You've already lost. But everyone else just sort of embraced death in a way that didn't make me feel emotionally attached for them or anything really. It just kind of felt cheap. It didn't necessarily feel awful, it just felt like they could have done so much more with the story. This is the fall of Reach, there is so much you can do here. The only other death that I could kind of give a pass to was Noble 6, just because it was neat to fight off all the Covenant and last as long as you can. It was still an inevitable death that you could have avoided by jumping on the ship with keys and just flying out of there, but no, you gotta die. It's actually kind of difficult talking about the story because I feel like there really isn't a whole lot to talk about. Everything has been established, we know what's going to happen. The whole point of the story is literally just to get Cortana to Master Chief, and that's it. And now we move on to the graphics. I kind of talked about it earlier with the PC port, but I feel like there's a lot more I can say here. Graphically, it is a little outdated since it's stuck on the 360, even back in 2010. I mean, Crysis came out a few years earlier and Battlefield 3 came out 1 year later. But what Reach lacks in technological advancement, it more than makes up with it in presentation. I may have said a lot of bad things about Reach over the last 9 years, but I never said anything bad about its art. The Spartan designs are the best we've seen in the entire franchise. The skyboxes are downright beautiful. The war-torn mountains off in the distance are a pleasure to look at. The music composed by Marty O'Donnell blending into the world is the best choice you could have. Even though I didn't like Reach back in the day, when this music plays, I still have that soft feeling for it. Reach is an extremely polished game, and I really have nothing but good things to say in this regard. Bungie clearly knew what they were doing with the 360 by this time. They had been working with it for years, and they had been working on the Halo franchise for a decade. Anything negative I could say about this game graphically is purely because it was stuck on an outdated console and nothing more. Gameplay is where I have really mixed opinions. Halo Reach doesn't have any awful levels like the previous games, say the Library in Halo CE or Cortana in Halo 3, but it also doesn't really have any fantastic levels like, say, the Silent Cartographer. My experience with Halo Reach is that it's consistently good at best and really boring at worst. It does feel like the game just sort of drags on and on at times without anything really keeping my attention. And the few times it tries to mix things up, say flying in space in a ship, I didn't care about. I don't really play Halo to fly around in a ship. I know a lot of people really like this section, but I don't care about this at all. Thankfully, this section is short and not the most difficult thing in the world, so it's not really that big of a problem, and if you like it, it's there for you. Aside from that, I just kind of have a really hard time remembering things about Halo Reach. It all just sort of blends together into a decent game that never really grabbed my attention. I just played this game yesterday, and I've already forgotten most of it. I don't have any extremely negative feelings towards the campaign, which is nice, but I don't have any extremely positive feelings either. I really only remember a few sections. The first part is right after George dies and you're all on your own, which is pretty neat, and the second section is right at the very end where you have to hold off as long as possible, which was pretty awesome. But that second thing is a very fleeting small moment, and the first thing is just a level that's good, not necessarily great. To me, the campaign was made by a developer that was very clearly extremely experienced, but seemed to lack that sort of inspiration. Halo 3 has a certain feel to it, and you can understand the developers really poured their heart into it. Halo Reach feels like something they had to do out of obligation. And they're experienced enough to make a good game in this way, but it just sort of lacks that charm that the previous Halo games had. I'm being really negative here, but Reach just doesn't really appeal to me gameplay-wise. The only real positive thing I can say about Reach's campaign is that thankfully it has co-op, and that's something I really miss out of shooters nowadays.
This is the most off-road truck you'll ever see. I'm gonna die from the scarab though, I guarantee it. Oh! Oh my god!
Oh my god, Derek!
It's okay, everything is fine. Oh, I almost just got stuck. I am out. Let's see if I can flip. Oh my god!
Oh my god!
Oh wow. He launched against the wall.
How are you alive? I lost my weapons. That was worth it.
We don't really see 4-player co-op shooters anymore. It's really hard to find just a casual single-player campaign I can play with my friends. They almost don't exist. I feel like Reach was right at the end of that era full of casual co-op single-player games you could enjoy with your friends time and time again. I really wish they'd come back. Nowadays all we really have is Borderlands, but that's less so just raw first-person shooter and part RPG. I mean, it kinda counts, but not exactly what I'm looking for. From here we go on to the multiplayer, and oh boy, this is a doozy. People either love Halo Reach's multiplayer or they hate it. There doesn't ever seem to be any in between. I was on the part that hated it, personally. I loved Halo 1, 2, and 3, and thought the Halo Reach's multiplayer felt like garbage compared to the previous games. But take my word for it, I really came back and gave Halo Reach another try. I hadn't played it in a good 6 years, so I wanted to come into it with a fresh mind, and I really wanted to like it, just like back in the day. I still spent thousands of hours playing Halo Reach when it came out. I really wanted to like the game, and that's why I can point out every mechanic that drives me crazy. I have the experience to say why I don't like the game. Later on in Reach's lifetime, I think I spent most of my time playing the Anniversary playlist, which had a 3-shot pistol, and that alone made the game feel so much better. But after coming back into Reach and giving it an honest try, and after playing it for about 12 hours the last few days, I really only confirmed what I already knew. I hate this game's multiplayer so much. It's incredibly frustrating because underneath all the dumb mechanics they added in, there's a legit good Halo game. But it's just ruined by everything else they piled on top of it. Let's start with the obvious one, Bloom. Bloom does not need to exist in any way whatsoever. People that defend Bloom generally say, oh, you just gotta pace your shots. The problem is, even when you are pacing your shots, you still end up missing. This is true RNG.
This game sucks! This game fucking sucks!
That should never happen. It's incredibly frustrating to have your crosshair right over a person and have your shot miss. If I'm aiming perfectly, my shot should hit. This is made even worse by the fact that your utility weapon is hit the hardest with Bloom. The DMR feels terrible. If your base gunplay doesn't feel good in a game based around gunplay, you're not going to like the game. The next thing they added in were loadouts and armor abilities. Everyone knows how much people hate armor lock, but it goes a lot deeper than that. This adds in more RNG. You cannot predict what people have. You drop someone to one shot and you know it's safe to come around that corner and clean up, but you don't know if they have armor lock, you don't know if they have sprint, you have no idea what they have. So running that corner is incredibly risky. What if they just armor lock EMP punch you and now you're dead? What if they have a jetpack and just jetpacked away to another level that you have no access to? In previous Halo games, you could predict everything happening around you. You could know whether someone picked up the power weapon and know whether it was safe to clean up that kill. You knew what was going on in the game at any given moment. If you had experience, you could tell what was going to happen. And since armor abilities are such a pivotal part of the gameplay, the maps have to be designed around them, resulting in some of the worst Halo maps we've ever seen at that point. I mean, how many of you ever want to play on Sword Base again? Or the incredibly open circle map of Powerhouse? What is this thing? And then we get into the fact that bleed through exists, basically damage me going through shields, which is completely asinine. If I have that much of my shield left, I should still be alive if you shoot me. See, in previous Halo games you could die from a burst of the BR because the first 2 shots would drop your shield and the last shot would be a headshot. In this game, part of your shield can just go away and you can die with that last shot anyway. This makes it feel incredibly inconsistent about whether you should have died or not. You never really know. It's so hard to get a feeling for this, and it feels excessively frustrating. And speaking of frustrating, something that pertains to this specific version of Halo Reach on PC, controllers actually end up being better than mouse and keyboard. What a crazy world, I never thought I would say that. Controllers have an astronomical amount of aim assist and bullet magnetism. Keyboard and mice have none. Obviously they shouldn't have aim assist, but having no bullet magnetism leads to shit like this.
Alright, pop out please. I'm gonna get shot by somebody else doing this.
Revenge.
Or I can just turn and kill.
What the fuck?
Do you guys see that shot?
That same shot with a controller would have hit. I'm not saying have no aim assist for controllers, they definitely need it, but perhaps tone the aim assist down and give bullet magnetism to mice and keyboard. The game was already frustrating enough, but that extra thing made me just say, alright, I'm just done. I'm done with playing Halo Reach's multiplayer. I'm going to wait for Halo Combat Evolved, Halo 2, and Halo 3 to come out. Those are the games I really want. I'm super excited we're getting Halo on PC, but I still have the same opinion I had when Reach came out. Fuck this game. I hate its multiplayer so goddamn much. You might be telling me, well, just play the hardcore mode, dummy. It was made exactly for you. And that's the only mode I can play that makes me not want to kill myself. That's the MLG variant with no bloom, and everything I've complained about is just sort of gone. But it also feels really boring and spiritless. The game was not made for this. At this point, the only feeling I have when I'm playing this game mode is, why am I not just playing Halo 2 or 3? To be frank, Halo Reach was not made for veterans of Halo 2 and 3 seasons. They weren't made for players like me. And Bungie has never catered to my style of player. This is why the competitive scene died with Halo Reach. People love to blame 343 for this for some odd reason, but no, the competitive scene died with Reach, not Halo 4. It only came back with Halo 5. As a whole, players just didn't seem to like Reach more than 3 either. Concurrent player base of Halo Reach dropped below Halo 3 in just 6 months. It still sold extremely well, but it was obvious that it just wasn't the follow-up that everyone wanted from Halo 3. There are diehard fans of it, but there's also people like me that were greatly disappointed by it. But just so I don't make this video entirely negative, what I will say is that I absolutely loved Forge, and that seems to be the general consensus. Halo Reach Forward was amazing. Unfortunately, the PC version doesn't have Forge right now, so I can't say much about it on PC. It's supposed to be coming to this version next year. I don't exactly know when, they just said sometime in 2020, so we'll see how good that will be when it comes out. But I did spend a lot of time. Forge World is an amazing map with so many things you can do on it. Whether it's playing custom games or racetracks or just exploring Forge World on its own, Forge is an amazing experience in Reach. I know a lot of people have this same sort of fondness for Firefight, but personally myself I found Firefight to be kind of boring. I was really spoiled by Killing Floor 1 and I just wanted to play Killing Floor 1 instead if it was going to be wave based. But yeah, that should be everything I've wanted to say about Reach. I guarantee you I am missing things. I have a lot of pent up frustration with this game, if you can't tell. I don't like this game. I've never liked this game. I'm excited it's on PC, that's really nice, but I really just want Halo Combat Evolved. I'm sure I've ruffled some feathers, and I'm sure some people really hate me right now and have left angry comments down below. I apologize, but Reach is just not my game. A big thanks goes to everyone that followed me and joined me while I was streaming this game over on my Twitch, twitch.tv/JerrickForGamingDragon. Come give it a follow if you want to hang out in the future. If you subscribe on Twitch, you'll get to see my videos one day ahead of time. Same thing goes for my patrons, patreon.com/JerrickFor. Thank all of you guys for watching this video, and I will see you next time.